to go ahead and call the July 12th Monterey County Emergency Medical Care Committee together. And did you have an announcement on tech that you'd like to make, Steve?
Yes, so we seem to be having some difficulties with our viewing of meeting materials as well as the people on Zoom through our screen here. So my encouragement is if you have a device where you can see the meeting by Zoom, we could share that way, or if you want to just pull up and have your meeting packet on your device so you can follow along. Because we can't show things on the screen. So if you want to see something that's an action item and you don't have a device where you can see it, please let me know. I brought a couple of items that are action items I can share in paper form.
Wi-Fi password.
A Wi-Fi password?
They go to the county
should be one
visitors.
that's
You
a
can just
yes,
click through.
Monterey County, yes, and all you guys have to do is just, I agree to the terms and conditions.
Okay.
Should be good.
Okay, let's jump into introductions. We'll start with EMCC members.
My name's Spencer Arnett. I'm the paramedic field rep for AMR. Will Heller, operations for AMR.
Ray Robbins, Assistant Rep.
John Burley, EMS Medical Director. John Anthony, Monterey County Parks Rep.
Teresa Rios, CMS Director.
Jim Langborg, BLS Fire Rep.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency.
Jeff Watkins, Chief Carmel.
Mike DeLeo, CAL FIRE EMS alternate.
Carla Spencer, a hospital administration rep.
Dick Greenson, physician representative.
Jody Schaefer, Citizen Rep.
If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Jeff Warner, Program Director with CalStar Medical Services.
Philip Brown, Base Hospital.
Recording in progress.
Ben Hitchcock, AMR CAS manager. Mike Messenger, AMR regional director.
Andrew Lopez, AMR Communications.
Justin Reyes, EMS Chief, Monterey County Regional Fire.
Paul Blah, Deputy Fire Chief, Seaside Fire Department.
Blake Anderson with the EMS Agency.
Good morning, Jesse Allard, EMS Agency. Good morning, Deborah Hopgood with the EMS Agency.
Sam Ballesteri, retired EMT.
Brenda Moreno, EMS Agency. Kimberly Hernandez, EMS Agency.
Okay, very good. Moving on to
There might be anybody joining us with
Yes.
Zoom?
Yeah,
Anybody who's joining by Zoom, if you,
Paul Wood, city manager, representing city managers.
thank you,
Joe Cafaro with the Hospital Council.
thank you.
Nicholas Hall, Seaside Fire Department.
Chris Montero with ESO.
I think you're all good.
We good?
all right. Moving on to public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none. Moving on to approval of past EMCC meeting minutes.
Approval of the May 10th EMCC meeting minutes.
And actually, I made a mistake there, Steve.
Oh.
So if we could just back up a little bit and get a roll call and establish a quorum.
Well, I will consider our introductions, if that's okay, as a roll call. I've recorded that, and we do have a quorum. I will just check on a couple folks who didn't mention. Sam Klemick, not here. Luis Garcia, not here. So we will have Mike DeLeo as alternate, fulfilling that, and Paul Wood. And since you're meeting remotely, do you meet any of the conditions that we discussed a couple meetings ago for meeting remotely?
Sorry, was that a question? I didn't understand.
That's okay. Since you're not here, and there are, and I wish I could remember the AB Assembly bill, I believe that allowed for meeting remotely, but there were certain conditions related to family emergencies and things. Do any of those apply to you?
No, they do not.
Okay, so at this point, we appreciate your participation, but without being present, I don't think you'll be able to vote unless you want to.
As long as you got a quorum.
We do have a quorum, so thank you.
Okay, yep.
So we do have a quorum and we'll go back to Mr. Robbins' motion to approve.
I move approval of the May 10th meetings minutes.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Yes. Moving on to reports, of the MAC committee report, the draft minutes. Jesse, do you have anything on that?
I don't have any additional other than the draft MAC meeting minutes were in the agenda packet and they were approved today by our MAC meeting.
Ops subcommittee.
Ops did not meet, so. go for it.
And actually EMS QI program. Blake, do you have anything on that?
Shortly update. In your packets, you should have a copy of the CQI tag report. During that time, we were unable to meet for our semi-QI committee. We had our stroke QI committee meet on June 28th, and where we presented a larger picture of what a patient-centered stroke system looks like. We also addressed scene times, alert notifications, door to CT benchmarks, and overall recommendations for the system. We had our T-Quick meeting on June 8th, where we took a deeper dive into the system trends in trauma care and went to validate our data for accuracy. And we're looking at minimizing scene times, best practices for traumatic cardiac arrest, missed TXA opportunities, and specialty traumatic patients. This would be pediatrics and geriatrics. CQI tag met on June 28th, where we discussed the 2023 policy protocol review cycle. We also discussed topics such as use of restraints, QI plans, and buprenorphine project, and a high performance CPR model for Monterey County. We also evaluated current ketamine administration trends and documentation, and highlighted improvements we've been seeing in the county after giving feedback to our providers, and discuss our health data exchange. Outside of that, there was nothing else to report.
Moving on to the ops committee, that meeting was canceled. So going into EMS agency director report, Teresa.
Thank you, Chief. In your packets, there is a report on some of the activities of the EMS agency. We kept it very short, and just to highlight some of the ones that we are picking up. One is, the high frequency users of EMS that you brought up, Chief Lambert, last meeting. Our initial work was delayed because we were in the process of reviewing and revising policies and protocols. Those are going out, so now we're catching a window here, so we can tackle some of these additional projects. So we will be pulling data to analyze and bring a report at a later time, by trying to develop a strategy, whatever appropriate strategy might be. The other one that wasn't not part of the discussion last time, but we received a report from CHAMP about patients, an increase in the number of patients who are coming in with contraband and or weapons, and just seeking the assistance of the EMS agency on dealing with this issue. I had the opportunity to attend the Law Enforcement Association, Captains Chiefs Association. I'm sorry, I'm getting that mixed up. Just to begin the conversation about some of the issues where law enforcement has come up, and they were very receptive to the topic. They did say that they do, it is their practice, their responsibility to search patients for weapons and or contraband. They want to, in order for them to be able to address if there's any issue, if they're missing that on their side, they need information. They need tangible information on which they can act. So what we're doing is following up with, once again, encouraging and emphasizing the need to file UOs. Absent the UO, then we will have no information to provide to law enforcement so they can help us address this issue. We are going to be sending out a memo distributed to the hospitals, to the system. Every now and then we got to kind of reinforce things. But emphasizing on this issue, because it's important that, it poses a risk to our field personnel as well as hospital personnel if patients are coming in with weapons and they find only when they are actually treating the patients. So I'm very grateful for how receptive the law enforcement group was to this topic and other topics that we discussed. And I look forward to being able to, in the future, report some progress in this area. One question that I asked was about could they join maybe some of the trainings that AMR holds with their personnel. The EMS agency, Dr. Burley has done a great job at putting out some trainings, and maybe we can do something jointly. They were open to that as well. So I think that we will be able to, provided that we can start getting some of that tangible information via UO, that we can start now funneling that information to law enforcement and addressing those issues, but even working together on providing more education to the system. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Teresa, I had a quick question on that one. It's the second time I've heard this. So in the data that's being collected by CHOMP, how many of these patients actually had law enforcement interaction? Because we could go to a medical, a guy could have a pocket knife in his back pocket. Law enforcement's never called. Is that a data point they're collecting of, hey, the patient came in with a weapon or, I mean, our paramedics don't pat people down to see if they have drugs in their pockets. I guess that, I'm sure law enforcement, they're called, they're going to do that, but I guess that's what we need to find out, where are these patients originating from?
And that's our next step, because often, sometimes when it comes to us just as a call, a concern. And so we need to then do the follow-up or try to find a way to get that tangible information, whether the hospital tracks that's a good way, but also just encouraging our stakeholders to file the UO with us so that we can in turn provide information. I think that exchange of information across the system is very important in this case, so that law enforcement, they know is that this is something that somebody is out in the field and they can do something, talk with an officer in particular, or is it for something else?
I guess the question I have is the definition of weapon. And how that interfaces with law enforcement. As an example, if I went out there and collapsed in the parking lot right now, and paramedics could find out it has a small blade about that long, that could be considered a weapon. And I'm not in any way interfacing with criminal activity or anything like that. So I guess a clear definition of what we're dealing with in that regard.
And I think there's a bigger concern with patients who may be already agitated coming into the hospital. So for us to do a follow-up, we just want to make sure that when there's a report to us that we take it seriously and then we do our due diligence in looking into it. Sometimes, we have data already available, but some of those questions are for a follow-up with the hospital.
I think I can add to that a little bit. It's been my experience that if it's a 5150 hold, we've already taken everything from the subject. We put it in a bag and we hand that over to whoever's transporting. So they've been patted down. But if it's a voluntary committal, more than likely we've already patted them down because we were called to the scene, right? But if we're out of the picture, and you can call us after the fact, but then we have to weigh, is this a consensual contact for us? Just because you want us to pat them down, am I infringing on that person's rights? So that's where we have to, where it gets a little gray. If we contact them because they were doing something out in public or in their house or wherever, and we pat them down, we make sure that they're safe to go, that's one thing. But if you guys call us after the fact and just say, hey, can you pat them down? it starts getting a little, yeah, they could complain or escalate, or there's things that could happen in that situation. So it's always better for us to come prior to. Or if you know something's gonna happen, call us before they get in the bus or before things like that happen, so that we can show up on scene, we can start investigating a little bit and create that exigency. Create that circumstance to where we're searching somebody legally and we're not trying to ramp somebody up because now they think their rights are getting violated.
And that's why we want to dig a little more into this, because all we had was an email that came in asking for our help and more so in the form of a policy. And it's like, before we go there, we don't know that is really what is needed, just on the things that all of you have shared. So for us, we need to go dig a little deeper. And if the hospitals are not tracking that, just as you said, Chief Reyes, then, for them to start getting us UOs. Other than that, we cannot look into the situation. Could be
What's a UO?
an unusual occurrence. So if something happens out in the field, unusual, then the field crews or the hospital, anybody in the system can submit an unusual occurrence to the EMS agency. We get that report and then we look into it. We can pull PCRs, interview individuals, depending on the situation. But then we look further into the situation to determine, did something really not go okay as it should? And it can be anything from patient care to a vehicle accident. I mean, you name it. You can, if you think it's an unusual situation, then you can report it to us in an unusual situation in EMS. So right now, just based on the email, we really don't have any other information, but it's serious enough that we should take a look and make a determination. It could be that it happened once or twice, and I think that we can expect that every now and then, it's going to happen. Something like that could happen, and for a variety of reasons. So, but at the very least, we want to make sure that the committee knows that this was presented to us. We're going to look into it, and then we'll report back. We'll definitely communicate with the hospitals, and then continue that communication with law enforcement. I was very grateful to when I attended the meeting and how receptive everybody at the meeting was in discussing this topic and acknowledging that some of the things that you just said. So thank you.
Great, great. Okay. Moving on to Mohawk activities, Jesse.
Okay, I'll just speak from behind you. So there is a written report within the agenda packet. There's just a few items to highlight. Number one, the Public Health Department of Operations Center was demobbed, and there's kind of a memo letter that explains that as well a few weeks ago. And in part of that, the Met Health system is demobbing some of our PPE equipment that the state won't take back, and we have abundance of. I think a lot of you guys may as well. So sorry if you heard this already, but if you are in the need of masks or shields or especially hand sanitizer, please let me know. We're going to send some communication out to our Med Health partners and distribute some of that equipment in a tiered approach. Also, the state has asked, Region 2 has asked us to start submitting heat event flash reports on the daily. And so I'm working with Chief DeLeo to try to get some fire intel, and I'll be sending that on behalf of our Mohawk every day. And then I think Deborah wanted to mention something on Car Week, and that's all I had from Mohawk.
The only thing I would add is that we're starting planning for Car Week events, and I'll be reaching out to some of the agencies for assistance in putting together a medical plan that will summarize the EMS resources available throughout the county during that week. Working with the EM on that.
Any questions for Mohawk? Thank you.
Moving on to EMS system performance metrics. We're going to include items A and B together, and just a note, item C, fire-based transport provider that is done on, was it a quarterly basis, and is not due until September.
Twice a year,
Fine.
March and September.
So turn it over to Kimberly.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to start with the ReadyNet and MCI drills. The testing and drills in general have remained consistent, and we continue to report to the hospitals monthly to maintain a two-way communication so we can give and receive feedback regarding the drills. So not really much to note there. Does anyone have any questions? The reports were included in the agenda packet that were emailed to you. Okay, I'm going to move on to ambulance provider contract compliance. Also, this PowerPoint was included in the agenda packet that was emailed to you. I'm just going to go over a few things. So this was reporting on the months of April and May for response time compliance by priority overall. All priorities were above 90% compliance for all, like I said, priorities. For response time compliance for green, yellow, and orange for the months of April and May, all reportable priorities were at or above 90% compliance. With the exception of priority 1 in yellow in May, which was at 89%, and priority 1 in orange for April, which was at 88%. We have met with AMR and discussed these things. They have adjusted their system status plan and also their deployment. And I'm going to turn it over to Will for just a minute so he can kind of go into that a little more depth.
So part of the review of the deficiencies in those areas was constant contact with our dispatch center to do a call review each morning to see where we're lying. So what we did find was that on a particular day of the week, we were getting higher call volumes in our yellow zone. So we've added an ambulance on Wednesday between 8 to 8 to cover yellow zone areas, as well as adjusting system status in the South County area with consideration to Salinas to ensure that as multiple calls come in, that we're covering the area as best we can. So I did send the copy to you all, and the agency had the copy, but essentially moving a unit from the Prunedale area to Baranda and then pushing units down at a lower level or higher level, pardon me, so that we're providing better coverage to those orange areas. We will continue with Angie's help to do review daily, which we do in our morning briefing to see where we lie in those areas, and if there was shoot delays from crew members, how many sick calls we had, what affected deployment that day, so we could continue to mitigate these issues in the South County. Thank you.
So, Will, just a question in the yellow zone when you were seeing those days. Can you specify what part of the county those yellow, was it North County, was it South County?
In the yellow zone, it was mostly in the Carmel Peninsula side where we were seeing the high call volume on Wednesdays. But what we did was add the unit and then adjust pushing units sort of from the peninsula side over into the valley, or giving the option to the dispatcher based on the levels at that particular time. So what the goal is to ensure that we're capturing the calls in the orange yellow zones in the peninsula side as well as the valley side when the multiple calls come in, which is a challenge in the South County area for us. The other thing specifically that I look into and I keep a close eye on is our crew performance, as far as ensuring that they are deploying on time once the call comes in, that there's no shoot delays, or if there's shoot delays, sort of mitigating that. And the way we do mitigate that is if there's multiple shoot delays from a crew member, we might move them from that shift over. So I think the biggest challenge that I have on a daily basis is, although we have higher paramedic staffing levels and EMTs have always been staffed fully, we have seen many, many sick calls in the month of May, June, and now in July, the summer months. So that's the adjustments that we've made.
So like what percentage of days are you going in fully staffed?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but it's actually increased more
Okay.
days of fully staffed than we've had ever
Okay.
since I've been in CES
Well, that
since
sounds good.
2019. We actually reached full staffing on our paramedics +1,
Okay.
but our fire partners hired. So we lost 6 people in a week.
Okay.
So in addition to sick calls. So what we do on a daily basis, Dr. Greenson, is kind of look at where we're at with the staffing levels, pair units together, adjust the system so that it is providing the best coverage with sort of emphasis on those areas where we're deficient.
Okay. But just sort of like a guesstimate. I mean, like how many ambulances do you have in 24-hour? How many like shifts and stuff?
Deployments 19.
Okay.
At night we have 6, but I added
Okay.
swing cars as well.
And like, so how many days are you going in there with 19? Is it like half of them or?
I
You know?
can't answer that accurately
Okay,
right now, totally,
okay.
sir. But what I will say is that, the report goes to Kim on a weekly basis there.
Uh,
I would say
It's bouncing between that. I mean, I just looked
It goes back and
through
forth.
most of June and
Uh-huh.
most of it was like 19 or 18.
Oh,
But
okay.
then, so-
Okay, cool. Okay.
So it was good, but
Okay.
that also, the part that doesn't get taken into account is during the system day, right? How many transfers are happening? how many
Right,
calls are
right,
happening.
right,
So like,
right.
that's when these,
Right.
generally the late calls are happening, right?
Okay.
When the system kind of explodes.
Right.
We all know that.
But it sounds like you solved the staffing problems that you were having a couple of years ago, right? That's kind of what you're saying, right? So.
It's been
cool.
like a ton of things, and I apologize for not being able to give you the.
No,
exact
that's, I mean, I'm right. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious,
I
but
understand.
right.
But yeah, no, definitely recruiting paramedics has been CES in my
Right.
like top priority since I got into the CES world in 2019. In addition to ensuring that we retain people as long as we can. And we're actually working with our fire partners right now to create sort of a pathway into fire that accommodates us, accommodates them through training and time as well.
I know there's times when the Salinas Valley Prison and CTF will suck up
Yes,
ambulances being from South County.
yes, sir.
I
And
pay attention to that quite a bit and realize that we're gonna have a while to wait possibly just because of that.
that's yes, sir. So what I have been doing also is they have invited me to their emergency medical committee. And so we do talk about sort of the usage of the ambulances, the most efficient use of those ambulances in there. It's been an interesting discussion, I would say, but definitely they've allowed me to show up there. So I feel that's the first hurdle, is ensuring that they understand our system better, because I think there was an education component about that. But also on our side of the fence, like you said, ensuring that we're keeping a very close eye on our performance in those areas where we're not meeting our obligation as best we can.
Chief, the contract compliance working group remains very aware of underserved areas. That's a term in the contract that does not get much visibility, but does with us. We work very closely at that, particularly in the valley cities. That is always a question that comes up. Or do we have any underserved areas, particularly in the valley cities? And part of it is driven by the prison system down there as well. So it's higher in our priorities as well.
And in addition to the deployment changes, Dr. Greenson and the rest of the committee, definitely with the new bid, as you know, we added swing cars that provide sort of coverage over those day-night halves a little bit better, so that we could, if needed, utilize them for more transfer care versus ensuring that we're keeping the stationary units that we need in South County, or excuse me, in the orange and yellow zone. And it's less effective. But again, it is highly dependent on how many people come to work that day and the call volumes.
Right.
So Will, the spike of in volume on Wednesdays is fascinating to me. Is that because there is a spike in 911 calls, or because there's an increase in transfer requests which impact the 911 calls?
I did not look at the transfer request side of things. What I looked at was the call volume and mutual aid requests as well.
Yeah.
So, and that day it trended to Wednesdays about 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock.
I mean, that's just such a odd,
In the
I mean,
area
when
as
you
well.
look at ER volumes and when people come in, that just, it's not part of it.
Weird,
Yeah, it was
That's not
interesting
part
for
of
us
this.
to look at. And I think, you know, the 8 to 8 component of it sort of covered the biggest swath of time that I
Yeah.
could see in the data. So, but again, we look at it
Yeah.
daily and try to mitigate things before they become bigger.
Kudos to you for seeing that Wednesday spike, because I would have never gone there.
Then special events are also gonna be putting a added pressure on the
Yes,
system. right?
yes, ma'am. Yeah, with the influx of population with Car Week, which I'm a big fan of. So I go to the event, so I see what happens there, you know, that we do take that into consideration. And as far as staffing goes, ensuring that we're incentivizing shifts a little bit more. So it's a little bit easier to pull people in and ensure that we're covering our obligation.
One thing I was going to add, I think Will did a great job offering our perspective on things, but one of the things for Dr. Greenson is that when we do have multiple sick calls, one of the great advantages that we got out of one of the amendments is that we can also, you know, if we lose, if 2 paramedics call in sick, for example, we can actually pair up the EMTs now and create a BLS unit that can be dedicated in the system just for doing interfacility transfers. So, you know, it's a great option. It also helps things a little bit and takes some of the load off of the system.
Say for the month of July, we had a larger amount of sick calls, Dr. Greenson, that allowed us to create those BLS a little more often. And it does take the burden off of the 911 side as well as the treatment.
Well, I mean, what it sounds like is, I mean, in general, it sounds like things are way better than they were a few years ago, so you deserve credit, right? So, yeah, so it sounds like, there's still more work to be done, but it sounds like it's way better.
From my perspective, it's, about keeping people, ensuring that they're, happy with us and stay as long as possible, and then working with fire to, create a pathway so we're not seeing massive spikes during their hiring season, which I totally get. Because we do try to do the same thing.
Just gonna jump into the medical priority dispatch system. The percentage of calls EMD remains consistent. It, varies percentage month to month, but it stays right about where it's been. And that's the end of contract compliance. Any questions? Thank you.
Moving on to old business, EMCC membership. Steve.
Yes, AMCC membership. So thank you all for getting the information we needed to get the reappointments completed this cycle. There's still a couple of people who I'm waiting for info. You guys know who you are because I keep pinging you, periodically to give us the recommendations from bodies that you guys represent. So thank you for those who've completed this. That group who's gone through and received board approval and appointment to the committee, you should have received from the clerk of the board your oath of office. Please get that done as early as possible. We do have a little leeway in the transition period, so it's not like you're off the EMCC, just because you didn't get the oath of office done. But let's just get the oath of office done, and then also at the appropriate time, Form 700. We need that completed also.
If we've already filled one out for the county, do we need to do a separate one for the committee?
No, it's as far as I know, it's just one.
Okay.
Because it just all goes to the same repository about the individual. So yeah, just a single Form 700 for whatever you happen to do. All right. We also had a request, and it's in your packet, related to attendance at EMCC, and unfortunately I can't show that. So basically, most members are attending, at least reasonably well. Going over the requirements in EMCC bylaws, they're just going to do a real quick read because I can't show it, unfortunately. Basically, vacancy occurs when a member's term expires, they die, which we hope never happens, or they cease to, be part of the organization that they represent. Or a position is declared vacant by the Board of Supervisors upon the recommendation of the committee due to the incumbent member's incapacity or failure to attend meetings. So that's what this comes down to. And if you saw the report, there are some members who participated a little less than they probably should have. We do have a new paramedic representative who hopefully will overcome that lack of representation. We do have issues, trying to make sure we have citizen rep alternates, but we're working on that. Anyways, if a committee member is absent from 3 consecutive regular meetings or from 3 of any 5 consecutive meetings, the committee may recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the Board of Supervisors declare a vacancy and appoint a replacement member. And then the secretary, which is me, monitor attendance, and when it has occurred, put the matter to the committee agenda for discussion, a recommendation to the board. So we have this attendance as a report. There are members who are in that description where they've failed to be here for 3 consecutive meetings or 3 within 5 consecutive meetings. So I will bring back a list of that if that's the will of this committee to take a vote to make a recommendation to the board.
I move that we make a recommendation to the board. that
Well,
anyone
we
who's
can't
not-
do a movement. I'm just recommending, just,
Okay.
if you guys- if this
you
is
can
the
make a
direction we'll go.
motion.
there's no action item. So it's basically, if it's the will of the committee, we'll bring this back for the action.
Okay, then
The next
it's up to the chair then to ask for a motion.
Well, do we need a motion or should this come back
It
as a
should come back.
separate action?
Yeah.
So what we need
The
to do is,
direction, I think.
Yeah,
more.
this is,
so get this on the agenda for the next
Bring it
meeting
back.
and we'll look for.
Okay, I recommend put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
it'll be there.
Anything else, Steve?
No, that's it, unless there's questions. As I said, I wish I could show you the chart, but it's in your packet. So those who can see your agenda packet, you can see the chart.
Monterey County Emergency Medical Services Ordinance Revision, Deborah.
Got a couple items in a row here, so I'll come up front. We are continuing to work on the draft of the EMS agency's ordinance, the EMS system ordinance. So we're working on specifically language related to AB 389 that will set forth some requirements for RFP considerations, implementation of fees, interfacility transfer related language, and then special event language and just some general cleanup. So we've gone through and drafted language for most of those sections at this point. We're currently in the process of having that reviewed by county council and getting their feedback on the drafts that we've created. Once that's been approved by county council and we have our more sort of finalized draft, we'll bring that forward for public comment and allow input from the general public as well as this committee. So more to come on that in the future, and happy to answer any questions on that particular item if there are any.
When do you think the draft's gonna come out? Just kind of
Probably, well, we do need to have it in place prior to release of an RFP. So I would anticipate before the end of the year. Is that a reasonable?
I didn't hear the question, but I'm guessing.
So you think we'll see the RFP in the fall or winter?
Oh, yeah, the RFP,
What, I guess the question in particular is when the draft of the ordinance might
the
come
ordinance.
out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but once we get the okay from, as soon as we get the okay from county council, and it's hard to predict when
Okay.
we'll get that.
So will the draft of the ordinance, how will we be notified? Will it come in a packet? Will it be in a separate email? How will we know to go look at the updated
We'll
ordinance?
receive a draft or.
Yeah.
or what?
Well, it will be released probably similar to how we do the policies and protocols, because they're gonna go out for public comment. We do send it to everybody on our distribution list. We post it on our website. We also announce that on Facebook to make sure we try to cast as wide a net as possible on notifications.
So I'll probably get an email saying here's the updated
Yeah,
ordinance.
and we're hoping it will be before the September meeting,
Okay.
so that it gets reviewed, and then we bring it,
Yeah.
we put it on the agenda in September for the endorsement, so that we can then take it to the board.
I just want to make sure I'm not, that I plan to read it and not the way I read the minutes before I come to this meeting.
No, we want to make sure that there's ample time for people to review it.
And as Deborah said, we'll just have her also address items C, D, E, and F as well.
So item C is the EMS agency's 2022 annual report to the Board of Supervisors. So if you'll recall, we brought a draft of that document to you in the last meeting in May, provided you with a couple months to review that, provide any feedback that you may have on that document. We have not received, other than a couple of things related to updating some logos and patches and some things like that for particular agencies, any other changes. So the document is pretty much unchanged from what you saw in May. There's another copy of it in your packet today. So we bring that to you guys looking for endorsement today from the group so that we can bring that to the board.
I move that we endorse the 22 EMS annual report as posted in our minutes.
Second, well,
All right.
so on this one, this is a big one. Let's do the roll call.
Yes. Roll call, Mike DeLeo.
Aye.
Will Hiller.
Aye.
Jim Lineborg,
Aye.
Barry Robbins,
Aye.
Jody Schaefer,
Aye.
Nick Greenson,
Aye.
Spencer Harnett,
Aye.
Carla Spencer,
Aye.
Chief Watkins, Jeff Watkins.
Aye.
John Anthony.
Aye.
All right, so the next item is the EMCC annual report to the Board of Supervisors. If you'll recall, this is a health and safety code requirement, as well as a county requirement for committees who are advisory committees to the Board of Supervisors to produce an annual report. We have been delinquent in providing this report in the past, so we're looking to come into compliance with that requirement and put forth a report. So again, we provided a draft report on behalf of the EMCC during the May meeting. It is designed to be submitted along with the annual report to serve as the EMC's annual report to the Board of Supervisors. So that's been out for comments as well. We have not received any comments or suggested edits to that document. So again, we would look for an endorsement of that, and then we would bring that forth on your behalf to the Board of Supervisors in conjunction with the annual report to serve as your satisfaction of that health and safety code requirement.
Move we endorse it.
You want to do this a discussion first?
Any discussion? I have a comment and I guess actually refers to both reports. So did read through them. A lot of work. It's very, I mentioned this before, it's very informative for me. Appreciate you being open to accepting my feedback to it. But they're very good through reports.
Like the motion. Endorse it.
I'll second. First and second, let's do a roll call.
All right, roll call to endorse the EMCC report to the board. Mike DeLeo.
Aye.
Will Hiller.
Aye.
Jim Lineborg,
Aye.
Barry Robbins.
Aye.
Jody Schaefer,
Aye.
Nick Greenson,
Aye.
Spencer Harnett.
Aye.
Carla Spencer,
Aye.
Jeff Watkins.
Aye.
John Anthony.
Aye.
Would you like me to take F out of order since I'm here? So this item is related to modifications to the structure of the EMS agency's advisory committees. Again, we talked about this a little bit in the May meeting for our new member. The current structure places the EMCC as an advisory committee to the Board of Supervisors, with the operations subcommittee and the medical advisory subcommittee serving as reporting to the EMCC, and then the QI committees report up to the EMCC through MAC. So what that does is it places some extra requirements on MAC, ops, and those QI committees. So as far as related to the Brown Act, attendance in person, publishing agendas, those sort of things. And it also creates a little bit of a conflict between, well, a true conflict between the quality improvement committees standing as confidential committees and those public notice and public participation requirements. So in light of that, as well as some feedback from members of MAC and Ops about the additional requirements to attend in person with the end of COVID and the end of those exemptions for participating remotely, it's caused some challenges for their members. We've been working with County Council to find a way to remove MAC and Ops and those QI committees from underneath EMCC and make them not subject to the Brown Act. So we did a survey of LEMSAs throughout the state and found that it's not common for the other committees to report up through EMCC. So our system as we have it set up is a little bit of an anomaly. We worked with County Council, and their advice was to basically dissolve the structure that we have in place currently. So we would dissolve our current MAC, Ops, and basically reform them as advisory committees to either the EMS agency director or the EMS agency medical director and director. So the big change that you would see is you currently see minutes from MAC and Ops come through in your EMCC agenda packets. And we would basically remove those, and Teresa and Dr. Burley would provide instead reports. So you wouldn't be seeing the full minutes, but you would still be receiving those reports and that information. So I think that's pretty much it. We have a staff memo in your agenda packet that describes all of this. We also have a copy of what would be the revamped bylaws for EMCC if this was to go into place. And then also a copy of our policy 1020 and the edits to that would go in place. So we're bringing this to you at this point for information, and we would look to bring this back in September for your potential endorsement and approval. So, but we did want to open it up for any discussion that the group may have.
One thing that if I may add is that as I've mentioned that we're looking internally at our processes just to make sure that we are meeting all of our requirements and in looking at those and then talking to Steve as well, who's, is our great historian. The current structure of the committees, hasn't always been that way. I believe from what my understanding is that my predecessor created this structure, but prior to that, what we are trying to we're going back to what it was, where MAC is an advisory committee more to the medical director, ops to the EMS director. We're not changing the role of those advisory groups, just the requirement to because we require them to report to EMCC, which is a board appointed committee. Then the requirements of Brown Act, then we extend those to the rest of the committee. So we try to eliminate that as Deborah said. But in essence, we would be going back to the way things were. And Steve, correct me if what I'm saying is wrong.
No, you're
Okay.
absolutely right. It's
Sounds like a good idea to me, and particularly from like the QI perspective, it seems like that could be cumbersome or might even expose some liability in there as well. So
Yeah, kind of set up a contradictory system and direction. So yeah, we would definitely like to correct that and remedy that.
Basically, what we're trying to do is get out from under the Brown Act requirements for those committees. The question is that I would have, I'm initially very, very positive on this and say, yes, endorse it, but are we losing anything in the process? Are there any downside risks? That's something we might want to consider in the interim between the next meeting. I can't think of any right now, and I can't think of any situations where we have overruled any recommendations from those committees. But in doing so, would we change anything that would eliminate our options or of this organization? I don't know.
maybe what we can do is ask staff in their staff report to include pros and cons to this. Do your
Pros and cons or
research.
downside risks.
Can include that. Frankly, you might be more aware of those things than we would be as well.
We were considering that, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we were working with county council. Because if somebody could identify some downsides to it would be county council. The only committee that is spelled out in the regulations is the EMCC. In terms of would this committee lose anything, that is why we are saying the reports that you are now getting via meeting minutes from MAC and Ops, you would get the information now through Dr. Burley and me. So instead of minutes, you would be getting a report from us as to the activities of Ops and MAC.
Well, someone who has multiple lawyers in his family, lawyers look at things in a legalistic sense. Most of us look at things as managers in a practical sense. Would we be losing any practical options or any practical means of functioning through that, or disrupting any lines of communication? That's what I'm asking. I don't know. I'm not sure. So I think we need to know, look at it from a very practical and a pragmatic standpoint, not a legal standpoint.
If I could real quick, you've been on the EMCC long enough to have been through the transition. If you didn't notice the transition from how it used to be to the current structure, you won't notice it going back the other way.
That's what I'm thinking right now. That's my thoughts, but I'm old enough to where I can overlook certain things too. So I just want us to be sure that we're not stepping on something that we, that into a bear trap that we don't know it's there, so.
And Eric, you think of anything between now and when we?
Yeah, I
bring
will
that,
let you know. I'll
Please
let you know.
do let
Yeah.
us know, because the more,
Yeah.
the more eyes on this. the better.
I'm hearkening back to actions we've taken past, and normally, everything we've dealt with those committees, we've okayed it and endorsed it, and there's never been a controversy, but, would we be throwing out any options by doing this? Still positive on it, but I want to be cautious.
All right. Any other discussion on the topic? All right, well, we'll take the requests under advisement, work on that, and then please do review the memo that's in there currently, as well as the draft bylaws and the draft of policy 1020. And please do forward any comments or suggestions that you may have on those.
Back to EMS training programs, Steve.
Okay, so training programs. At the last meeting, we discussed the paramedic training program and the review of the Hartnell College EMT program, both of which, are moving along quite nicely. And it was asked, since we had not yet performed the review at the Monterey Peninsula College EMT program, that this committee would like to hear how that review went. And honestly, the review went very well. They've got high quality staff. Honestly, the program was, I don't want to say in decline, but it was administratively not keeping up. And the current staff that is there have done an amazing job of turning around the administrative functions and probably resulting in even a better EMT education at the student level. We'll be reviewing the classroom eventually to confirm that, but the MPC program is quite good. And if I recall correctly, are doing better than the state average of getting their students through the National Registry exam process.
Steve, from time to time, we hear in junior college and upper levels of college, there are financial concerns, fiscal concerns. And usually these are played out in a closed room where the budgeteers get in there and hack at each other and say, no, we want to cut this program, we want to cut that program. Is there any undercurrent within those colleges to eliminate those programs or curtail those programs in any way due to fiscal constraints?
Good question. I'll go back. I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask. We have had 3 approved EMT training programs in Monterey County. We had one through the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, and that program was always very tenuous. The instructor left that program and there was no real institutional will to continue. Not a bad thing. The number of students who came through, very great students, got a chance to meet a lot of them at various times, but it was just difficult for them as under 18 in age to get the National Registry. And by the time they were old enough to do it, the success rate for passing National Registry was poor. Not for lack of trying by the instructor, it just was not good. So we did lose that program. The Hartnell program, when we did the review, it was obvious that the institution is fully behind it. They've separated it out to some extent from the nursing program and threw a bunch of money at it. And they have, again, have done amazing work with high fidelity simulation. Honestly, if you can ever get a chance to go see their program, it is amazing the technology that they have. MPC doesn't have quite the same technology, but they are also moving to high fidelity simulation. Their mannequins, amazing things that can be done with them. Both programs have purchased high fidelity simulation mannequins that are human cast mannequins. If you walk into a room, if the light's even slightly dim, you're going to assume that there's an actual live person there because they have human hair. They look real. They feel as real as you can imagine. So both programs are putting a lot of resources into the programs. Student attendance down a little bit at MPC, but not a level where they are going to close their program. So they're both doing very well.
Okay, now we hear the state has a $30 billion shortfall in their budget. How dependent are those programs on state supplemental funding?
I do not know how dependent the EMT programs are. That would be a whole college issue. I do know that the cost to the students is fairly high, and that is in some ways maybe a barrier to some students taking these courses, but we require so much of the students. There's a significant hour requirement for EMT. I mean, when I took EMT, it was an 81-hour class. These students are having 184 hours. That is the requirement. So it's so much more. They've increased, mine was a 4-unit class. They're now, I think, 7 and 9-unit courses, depending on which college you take it through. So there's a significant financial outlay by the student, because they also need to get vaccinations. They also need to do a background, live scan background check. There's the cost for the students, if you look at the estimates, and it's in our EMS annual plan, the cost is well over $1,000 to the student between tuition and all the other expenses just to get an EMT certificate. And these students are doing it. So again, not seeing the financial side of it, because the students are doing it if they're at all able to do so. That helps. Can I answer the question? Maybe a little bit more than that too.
Yeah, I could probably come up with some more, but not done at this point in time.
Okay. So excellent programs. The only other thing I'll add is we also are reviewing our EMT or our EMS continuing education providers. 7 of them are coming due this month for their renewal and review. So we're going out and dealing with those also. So a busy month for the EMS agency for that.
All boils down to money. And this is a vital function, it's vital training. And if it's coming out of the student's pocket in its entirety, I would wonder where our politicians are and maybe coming up with some sort of supplement for the students and or the schools. And is there any action in that regard? So and the answer is probably not.
Steve?
Sir.
I'm in the process of trying to set up a 5-year scholarship program for MPC's EMT program by giving them a donation.
Nice.
So that might help some of the students who can't afford it.
Great discussion. Okay, moving on to new business. Medical Advisory Subcommittee endorsements. Jesse.
I'm gonna report from back here. So MAC is excited to come to the EMCC today with we're looking for an action on 4 different endorsements. The first one is Chief Watkins here to my left, the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety for Carmel by the Sea Police Department. And then also an alternate behind Dr. Greenson is Dr. Stemeyer. Am I saying that right? So he is an alternate. And then there's 2 other additional physicians, Dr. Orchard and Dr. Click, both from Natividad, who we're looking to endorse for another term.
I move that we endorse all 4
I second it.
and just do it as all at once, not one at a time.
Thank you.
I second that.
All in favor? Say aye.
Well, I think they're doing all 4. We still have to do the roll call. So anyways,
Trying to move this along.
I know. So anyways, so for endorsement of all 4 primary or alternate members to MAC from EMCC, let's see, Mike DeLeo.
Aye.
Will Hiller. Jim Lamborg.
Aye.
Harry Robbins.
Aye.
Jody Schaefer.
Aye.
Nick Greenson.
Aye.
Spencer Harnett.
Aye.
Carla Spencer.
Aye.
Jeff Watkins.
Can I do
Abstain.
that from? I have to abstain. Right?
You can, no, you can, I mean,
I
may
can
look
endorse
weird, but you
myself.
can, but yeah, you can abstain if you wish. and then John Anthony.
Aye.
Thank you.
On to SWOT analysis, Deborah.
Yes. So this is another item that's coming back from the May meeting. So just prior to the May meeting, we released a SWOT analysis survey through a Google form and a fillable PDF to our stakeholders and the general public. We had a 30-day comment period where we accepted responses on that form. Thank you to everyone, many of you in this room who submitted responses to that and provided us with feedback on the current status of the EMS system, as well as some ideas for future improvement. So we went through the responses we received, compiled them. We received about 20 responses from a variety of different sources throughout the county in response to that survey that we put out. And we went through and kind of divided them, compiled them into one document, but divided into sort of thematic areas that popped out to us as we were going through them. So came up with the areas of clinical, personnel, equipment, operational, and then kind of a general catch-all area for each of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that were included in that survey. So then we went through that and kind of tried to pick out some recurring trends or themes that were coming up within each of those areas. So just to highlight some things that we pulled out as an agency in our discussions were in the strengths. There were many, many comments on the protocols and that we have open progressive protocols. So that was great to see. Much praise for our specialty hospital services and our facilities that are delivering those services in the county. Lots of compliments for the personnel, whether it be from AMR, from the fire departments, law enforcement, our facilities, and then the EMS agency itself. Good positive feedback on the dispatch centers and the EMD system, the use of priority dispatch and prioritizing those calls and the aid that that's been to the system. And then timely with the storms that just occurred, our positive feedback on our ability to respond to disasters internally. So, and then moving on to weaknesses, I will save some of this for Jesse to talk about in his next item, but we did receive multiple comments on ESO and the ability to build reports, access data, kind of have a uniform data system throughout the county. And then the lack of feedback, consistent feedback from the facilities on patients and participation in the health data exchange. We also noted some weaknesses related to staffing. Many comments on the lack of ambulance type requirements, IFT delays, and then service area challenges and differences. And I think that's reflected in those conversations that we had earlier today. So as far as opportunities, many mentions of increasing training opportunities. So whether that be from the agencies, the EMS agency, and on a variety of different topics. So clinical topics, disaster response, kind of you name it, responses related to training, enhancing our mutual aid resources, and then continuing to build and enhance the partnerships that we have established throughout the county, whether it be amongst fire or ambulance transport or facilities, that sort of thing. Threats, staffing again came up as one might expect. The demanding performance requirements that we have throughout the county as far as the challenges of covering the various areas, meeting those IFT and CCT requirements on top of the 911 responses as well. The ever popular funding issues and changing system demands. So just wanted to kind of put out some themes that we picked up on, and then we will be posting all of the compiled responses on our website. We've also de-identified the individual responses. We'll post those on the website. You have a copy of the compiled responses in your packet. And then just wanted to open it up for any discussion that there might be.
Pretty good list. And so this is the compiled, so some of these multiple people said, this is a big list.
This is basically, we went through all of the responses that we received, tried to break them down into those individual areas, but it's kind of unedited versions of a couple of grammatical corrections. So, but no substantive changes. It's everyone's list of submissions. So yeah, it was a lot of information that came in, but we were able to pull out some themes that kind of reoccurred from different responses.
And can you tell me now that you have this information and it's a huge amount of information, how are you going to distill it down to action items?
Well, I think a first step that we did is went through and picked out some of those themes. The information's still pretty new to us. We had that 30-day period, so we haven't had more than about a couple weeks to sort of start digesting it and, spent that initial time kind of compiling everything, picking out these themes. And then I think as the agency, we'll have to sit down, look at whether it's addressing certain things. Some of these are RFP related, some of them are general, system issues, kind of prioritizing the list of themes that we've identified through here and beginning to address those based on the priorities that we identify. I think we've taken some steps already to address some of the things that have come up in here. So there are things that I think this group and the agency and the participants may be more aware of than the general public or the average EMT or paramedic on the field. So like the changes to the policies and protocols, the increased training, like Dr. Burley's offerings that he's been doing, all the work that Will and AMR have been doing to increase staffing, those sort of things. So some of these are in progress, and then I think we'll spend some time prioritizing and coming up with the action from there. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
We really appreciate all the feedback. We always hope for a lot of participation from the system. And we, at least the team always hears me say, I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, and the pretty I added to it. Because that is how we really gonna improve the system. We want to know the things that we're doing well. We're in just as much as we want to know where we're not quite there yet. One of the things that looking at the all of the surveys that came back is there anything where we can send out another quick questionnaire, with more targeted questions so we can gather information. So there are different tools that we can use. And so right now that the policy, that 2024 policy and protocol documents are going to be out for public comment, then we're catching, sorry about that. We're going to be catching, we're going to try to work with that window to do some of this work.
Are you going to distill it into a list that we can say, okay, now that we have the SWOT analysis, this year our priorities are A, B, and C?
Yeah, so yes, it's kind of like, peeling the layers, right?
Because you can't do it all.
Oh, no.
You've got to distill this down to some action items. I'm going to make an assumption here that's going to come back at some point in time to this committee.
Yes,
Okay.
one of the goals that I've had since I became director is that whether it's January 1st, July 1st, whatever day you want to pick, that we come to the committee with our strategy, for the year, set up our goals and objectives and action items, and that way we know where we are going. But that also requires a discussion with our committees to develop that. There's been such a long transition, the staff shortages, COVID, all of those things that we always mention. We have a really great team now that we are able to start to do those things, like the SWOT analysis. And so my hope is that for the next year, whether it be in next January or next July, that by then you'll start to see that shift with the agency where we really bring in, working from a strategy, a clear strategy as to how we're going to get the system to the next phase.
I will say we had already started to work on the health data exchange in some fashion. It was delayed throughout COVID, and we've recently worked on bringing that back together and getting that moving forward again. But there was also a lot of feedback related to ESO in general and some data things and all of that, and we were able to share that with them and provide them some feedback. So if there are specific things like that we can pass along and hopefully make some improvements that maybe technically outside of our control, but maybe we can help facilitate and look to do that as well. So you'll hear more on the HDE from Jesse shortly.
So the purpose of the SWOT was RFP related more so than system relation, or both?
A combination of both, honestly. Yeah. Some things may be actionable outside the context of an RFP, or some may be broader system changes that might require an RFP to implement. We really left it open to ask people to evaluate the EMS system as it currently stands, and then sort of their hopes and dreams and aspirations for the EMS system for the future. So,
okay, because there's a lot of system items here, but it seems like there's a lot of like specific personnel items for the AMR side. And curious how those would translate into system changes. or RFP change?
Yeah, I think it would depend on the, again, that prioritization and whatever the individual impact is and sort of, there are challenges with any implementation as far as, maybe balancing a cost associated with it or an effort associated with it versus things like what is the overall ambulance fee end up being cost for service. So about whole
I see like
balancing act.
bathroom stuff.
Yeah.
Just not making the connection on how toilets relate to the system all the time, but
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a concern from someone within the system and, certainly crew safety and all of those concerns. So it's, but we didn't filter at all. So whether or not it was sort of as Teresa said, the good, the bad and the ugly, it all went into this report unfiltered. So
It's not unusual when you do this sort of analysis, unless you really target your questions, but we made it intentionally, made it very open-ended. When you really wanted to hear what people had to say about the system. And then, like I said, now we can maybe looking at the themes, the recurring themes, now maybe target some questions specific to certain things, but that's going to happen when you do this type of work.
just, I guess from my perspective, the targeting aspect, when there's personnel issues in there, we'd like to be associated with those too.
Yes.
Have some input on those, because I have input as well.
Yeah,
appreciate
and understand that sometimes they are providing feedback. There may be instances when somebody provides feedback in an area that is not so much an area that it is under the control of the agency, but it is about the system. So how we approach that, we'll have to see. But if nothing else is giving you information too, right? But as we just did sharing it, and the whole goal has been, the transparency of the system and the processes that we have. So that's what analysis is like. This is what we got,
Well, there's some potentially sensitive issues within that package.
I'd just like to make a comment. I think, I've only been in the county coming up on 5 years, but this is the first time I've seen anything. So it's a good start. When you start something, there's always some bumps in how you do it. And I think it's a positive step. And I'm sure the outcome will be good in the long run. So
It's a perspective, which is good.
moving on to health data exchange, Jesse.
Okay, well, speaking of toilets, I wanted to talk to you guys about HDE today. I can't address that, but we are excited to talk to you about a project that I think kind of outdates a lot of us at the EMS agency, but something that we haven't been able to focus on due to a myriad of reasons, COVID being a big one, and that's HDE. There is a report in your packet that kind of explains the various level of data exchange from all 4 hospitals. And so we're going to continue to work on that. We absolutely want to dispense some effort into this project, kind of reinstitute it and bring back a working group called our EMS data system working group. I think Fred Claridge was a part of that, if you remember Fred. So a group that had a similar kind of mission. We're reinstituting that to focus on HDE. We have Chris from ESO, who I know has to jump off soon, so I just want to transition to him before we lose him. And we have asked him to kind of jump on and really are leaning on ESO's leadership to help us navigate through the HDE kind of platform. So Chris, if you could speak to that, and then maybe the switch from 3.5.
You bet. Thank you all. I really appreciate the time today. Chris Montero with ESO. I'm our senior director over our state and federal programs. I told Jesse that I will try my hardest to be at your next meeting in person so that we can have more effective dialogue for sure. It also helps to be on Zoom because my next meeting's in New York, so it's a little hard to get across country that quickly. So thank you all for your time. I think this HDE project really brings to light some of the great strides we've made with our EMS agencies. We did talk at the first meeting with the medical directors, mainly about how we can move that data in an effective way so that you can get outcomes back. Really, the biggest piece that we're working on now is getting the hospitals connected, making sure that they understand the need for this, and really then using that data for your all's practice so that we can get data back to the providers so that they can do basically real time QA, QI on their own care, which I think is one of the hallmarks of HDE. I'm really willing to stand for some questions, but first I want to talk about the 3.5 transition for ESO and the state of California. I've had conversations with the state. As recently as yesterday, we are working to move all of our ESO customers. Let me take a step back. So the way we have designed ESO and the way we apply our schematrons, which is the thing that basically tells you what rules you have to apply to an EPCR before you can submit and lock that record. We do that state by state. So when we do a big transition like we are from 3.4 to 3.5, we have to move the entire state at once. So during our conversations, we recognize the state of California is going to turn off, just like the rest of the nation, the ability to send 3.4 records on December 31st of this year. Our transition date for Mark and the state of California and his team will be September 27th. And you all will start to receive notifications from us via email and in app. So when you log in, one of the very first things you'll see pop up in ESO is that we're getting ready to transition you, and that'll come 60 days prior, as well as 1 month prior, and then 2 weeks prior. So there will be plenty of warning, as well as within the email, as well as within the in-app notification, we have training. So there's not a lot of changes to 3.5, but I think the biggest changes are in the disposition field and the way that you document the way you transport a patient. And so there are a few more fields that will need to be filled out because of the requirements that NMSIS has made to make that change. So the training isn't onerous, and nor is it like when we moved, if you all remember, when we moved from 2 to 3, that was a way bigger lift. So this will be a minor change. We've created trainings that take less than 5 to 10 minutes, so you can really understand it and send it out to all your providers to make sure that they can basically adequately document and get those records to pass. The other thing is with HDE2, we're going to make sure that all of the records are moving to the hospitals. And when they move into the hospitals, that the thing that we'll need to really keep a lot of maintenance on, that the state of California does a great job of, is maintaining a facility list and facility IDs that make a lot of sense. So once we do that, then we'll do some troubleshooting to make sure that everything flows. You'll start to see those outcomes start returning. And then y'all can decide, basically system by system, agency by agency, if you wish, how you want those outcomes to be displayed, and all the way down to the paramedic level. Do you just want them in QA, QI? What's really nice is the EMS agency will be able to do real comparative data based on what the ambulance was called for, what the paramedic unit was called for, and what the outcome was. And then we'll be able to actually look at the medical care that occurred on that call to make sure, that everything was applied appropriately. So I think that outcome data is going to be immensely important as you guys start to look at QA, QI and a system design approach. And I'll stand for questions.
The next steps on HDE is us convening this work groups, soliciting your participation, creating a timeline and starting to manage the project, getting a really good detailed understanding of what exchange is occurring with each 4 hospitals and our transport providers. So look for more information, exciting project. Are there any HDE questions for myself or ESO?
Any discussion? All right, moving on. Announcements for the good of the order. Anybody have any information? That is no. I'll just make a quick comment. I think it's been a very productive meeting. A lot of good information has been exchanged. Moving on to the next meeting. Next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 13th at 30 a.m. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn.